installment in my affordable dream car series, and this week we're looking at a pint-sized Italian beauty. This is the Alfa Romeo 4C Spider. It would be fair to say that the 4C is a car which didn't have an easy ride, but I think now that it's discontinued, it is probably the right time to re-evaluate this car's position in the automotive landscape. Alfa Romeo were not in a good place when the 4C was announced, with an aging lineup of front-wheel drive cars that were, for the large part, reasonably uninspiring. The promise of a carbon-topped, ultra-lightweight supercar light really excited people, and when the car arrived, I think it's fair to say that most who drove it were somewhat deflated. It received accusations of being almost lethal in its steering, somewhat unexciting in terms of its engine, and, well, pretty divisive in its styling, particularly the bug-eye headlights up front, as on this example. The 4C never sold very well at all, and according to one source that I found, for the last few months in Europe, Alfa Romeo have sold only 2 a month. The car is, I believe, now fully discontinued, but its demise was almost as strange as its beginning. There were announcements a couple of years ago that the car was discontinued, then a quick retraction and the issuing of a statement saying no, it was just the coupe that was being discontinued. Then they said no, actually that's just in America, and nobody really seemed to know what on earth was going on. However, the 4C, I believe, is now no more. It's tragic too, really, because not long after the 4C's demise, we also saw the other exciting plans that Alfa Romeo had go by the wayside.
Since I last saw the car in 2018, it's had only 2 changes. The first is a remap to about 280 horsepower with 420 Nm or 310 pound-foot of torque. The car certainly pulls hard up to the national speed limit, but for track work it does start to slow down as you approach 100 mph. However, on the road it is seriously quick. The dual clutch box is not the fastest I've ever used, but it's surprisingly smooth even in dynamic mode, helping keep the car settled. The other modification is for handling.
Alfa Workshop offer 3 versions of their suspension block, which is aimed at reducing the crazy amount of bump steer that these cars suffered with from factory. Because this is primarily a road car, my buddy Steve went with the intermediate version, and from my brief experience I have to say they do work. The car does still have excellent steering feel, not perhaps quite Lotus brilliant, but very, very close. Part of being a dream car, surely, is the fact that you have to look at something and truly lust after it. When pictures of the 4C first came out, I wasn't entirely sold on it, nor its combination of twin-clutch gearbox and 4-cylinder turbo engine, but I have to say, in person, it looks mean. The engine still leaves me lukewarm, but if you want to pep it up a bit, Alfa Workshop have a crazy range of upgrades up to and including a 2-litre conversion, providing, in their words, anywhere up to 500 horsepower and possibly beyond. That would be rather exciting indeed. The view out is very special, and from in here it does genuinely feel like a baby supercar. My major criticism of the car first time round was that the interior wasn't up to scratch, and that is still the case now.
These seats are fantastic, but the rest of the package simply isn't good enough. Scratchy plastic door cards and controls lifted right out of a van have no place in a car which carried a list price in some cases of almost £70,000. Fans of the 4C will always point out that it's the only car at this price point with a carbon tub, like it's an excuse. But I think that if Alfa spent so much on that they didn't have any budget left over for some nice switches, they got their priorities wrong. A couple of square meters of leather would really lift this interior. The door cards, the dash, the windscreen surround and the sun visors should all be trimmed in that or maybe Alcantara. It wouldn't have cost them that much more, and some of this was standard in US market cars. For me, it should have been standard in all of them.
Let's talk prices, shall we? A couple of years on from my last review, and it's very interesting to see how things have changed, or more accurately, how they haven't. My buddy Steve isn't really one to keep onto cars for all that long, but he's had this for quite a while now. And part of the reasoning for that is that it's worth now very, very close to what he originally paid for it.
A quick search in the classifieds would tell me that you'd struggle to get a 4C for anything less than 30 grand. That puts it in direct competition with the V6 Lotus Exige, a more powerful car but slightly heavier. The Lotus sounds far nicer and in stock form also handles better, and it is faster. But the 4C does have the allure of the exotic carbon tub, and they are overall a much rarer sight. I'm a Lotus man at heart, but I really do feel like the 4C didn't deserve the slating that it got in the press. If you're thinking of buying one or already have, please let AlphaWorks loose on it, because this thing was far closer to brilliant than anyone gave it credit for.
This particular example has the race exhaust fitted, but it does not have the race suspension. That was a factory option which a lot of people went for, but it does nothing apparently other than ruin the ride. And let's see now with its improved suspension just how well this car can cope with a British B-road. It's a crazy little thing, and it is definitely much improved over standard. The chassis really does talk to you. There's no point whatsoever in revving this engine out. By 5,000 RPM, it is done. But it more than compensates by having an utterly savage low and mid-range punch. Turbo lag is present, and bizarrely Alfa Romeo did not choose to fit a twin-scroll turbo to this car. That is another upgrade that you can get from AlphaWorks, but as you might imagine, by the time you start doing that, the costs will spiral considerably. And getting anything more than about 300 horsepower of these will require some serious investment. However, for a road like this, the sub 300 horsepower figure for this car is plenty to move the 1,000 kilos down the road, and believe me, these are 1,000 kilos, they're not the 900 that Alfa Romeo claim. You get a little turbo chip out of it, and I have to say, it's a lot of fun. I would personally prefer the engine to be more responsive, and that soundtrack is very, very lacking. But in terms of driver excitement, this is a fantastic thing, and a brilliant car for a nice sunny Sunday afternoon. However, just being able to go down a back road quickly isn't enough to warrant inclusion in my affordable dream car series. It's also got to be something that can be run and maintained on a realistic budget. And so for that, I'm going to hand you over to my friend and fellow YouTuber and 4C owner, Steph AB.
Thanks, James. Hello to all of James's audience. For those who don't know me, my name is Steph ABtv, an automotive content channel, just like James is, and I kind of specialise in Italian, Alpha content, I guess, but I pretty much do everything now. So I guess touching on what James said earlier on in the video, what are the kind of things that you need to look out for in this car? To be fair, the 4C is pretty bulletproof. There's not that much that can really go wrong about it. I know people like to say that Alfa Romeo is a car that, you know, has reliability challenges, but something like this, there's not much to it, so not much can go wrong. There are a couple of things that make this car quite delicate, and delicate and reliable are two separate things. When I talk about delicate, I'm talking about the fact that due to the carbon tub, any damage to the carbon tub means this car is effectively a write-off. The second is all the panels are of kind of, I guess they're like a fiberglass style material, which again means if you smash up one of the panels, it's going to cost you a flipping fortune, and it might potentially even cause a write-off as well if you damage parts which are effectively linked kind of to the chassis. Things that can go wrong with this car are mainly around the suspension area. Kind of the front bushes tend to wear on these cars, and if that does happen, then potentially your wishbones will fail. But really, that's it. And I've spoken to a number of people across multiple forums who have driven these cars for up to 80,000 miles, and they haven't reported many issues at all. So that kind of set aside is really the only things you need to worry about when it comes to the 4C. The other stuff from a running cost perspective, fill it up is really cheap. You know, fill 45, 50 quid, gives you around 230 odd miles if you drive it sensibly. Insurance isn't too bad. It costs me at 34 years of age around about £1,000 a year. And then the final point, I guess, is maintenance and running cost. Now, if you're going to get a 4C, make sure you go to take it to Alfa Works. You can go main dealer, but the reality is that they have not even come close to servicing the amount of cars that Alfa Works do. Alfa Works specialise in 4Cs. This car has had all of its service done by Alfa Works, and it will continue to be taken there. Your biggest service, more than anything, as I believe it's your 4th or 5th service, which is your major, which involves a whole bolt tightening process, and that can cost you around about 600 quid from Alfa Works. Smaller oil changes around about between 150 to 250, depending on, you know, if you need any extra bits here and there. So really and truly, running costs on this car are pretty much they're quite low, and for what you get from this car, it is brilliant. I know James touched earlier on in the video about the Alfa Works steering package. If you don't have that when you're going to buy one, go and get it done. It makes such a difference. Interestingly, this car has had some spacers put on it, so rear spacers won't make a difference to the handling, but if you play with the fronts, it does mess up the geometry a little bit. So note to anyone potentially buying it. But would I recommend buying one? I would, personally. I've had one for just over a year, and I think for everything you get from it in terms of kind of exotic looks, exotic feel, I don't think you can go wrong. They're brilliant, brilliant cars. Anyway, thanks for having me, James, and back over to you, mate.
With exotic looks and reasonable running costs, the 4C should have been a surefire hit, so why wasn't it? For me, it's a combination. The UK Alfa Romeo dealer network certainly didn't help. I actually considered a 4C when they were new, but I was told the only way to test drive one was to buy it and hope that I liked it. That's not great. The pricing of the car put it in contention with other, much more powerful, larger and more practical rivals like the Lotus Evora 400, the Porsche Boxster, or at the time I could even have bought a second-hand Audi R8 V10. Alfa Romeo's poor reputation for build quality still haunted them, even though this car seems to be largely free of that worry. In theory, the car is actually a lot more user-friendly than the Lotus Elise, being far easier to get into and out of, but the truth is, for people looking for a daily driver, the 4C is still too compromised. The boot feels much smaller than that even in the Lotus, although Alfa claim it's the same size, but then for die-hard petrol heads, the combination of turbocharged engine and automatic gearbox are probably too much of a compromise in the other direction. However, if none of this sounds like a problem, go and try an Alfa Romeo 4C. You won't regret it, and even better, with no more cars like this on the horizon from Alfa, it's a car that even your bank manager might approve of.